the secret is you got to coordinate.
So hey, I'm back. Going to go through the various pedals I've chosen for this pedalboard build and explain why I've chosen them, what I'm going for. I should first preface all this by explaining the greater picture of what I'm going for overall. I've been listening to a lot of what is called doom, sludge, stoner metal, this sort of slow, ultra heavy, fuzzy kind of rock, very Black Sabbath throwback kind of stuff. And I'm enjoying it to a point. The point being the vocals are usually crap, if they're vocals at all. There's a lot of screaming, a lot of growling. Not my bag, but I'm loving the music. So my thought is I want to put together a new group to play literally a new subgenre of music that's going to have the guitar sounds of doom, sludge, whatever you want to call it, but with actual sung vocals, maybe even with some harmonies, who knows, it's dare to dream, and incorporate some of that electronic music that I talked about before. Maybe not even have a drummer, maybe drum machines, groove boxes. Like I said, I'm forging new ground here, at least as far as I know. If this already exists, I've not found it yet. And if I'm wrong, tell me below in the comments. So let me explain to you what I've got here and why. Now, I mentioned in the last video that I had this little buffer pedal up as a placeholder. What I'm going to have there is a bit crusher, which I recently found online. It'll give you some really otherworldly, fuzzy sort of synthetic sounds. It's monophonic, so it's perfect for big, dumb riffs. And I'm going to try it out. If it doesn't work, then I'll be able to move everything down one and have room for the boost pedal that I want to have at the end of the chain, ultimately. Enough of that. Next up, MXR Dynacomp. I have found in my time of playing with ray gun that while a compressor might not sound that great in isolation, while you're in the heat of battle and things are loud, stomping on a compressor with not too extreme of a setting suddenly gives this huge swath of clarity to whatever you're playing. The notes jump out above the din. And like I said, if you're playing by yourself, you might not get that feeling, but it definitely happens in the middle of a cacophony of sound. Next up, one of my favorite effects pedals, the Phase 90. I used to use one of these in the old days when I played lead guitar for Steve Van Sack and the Joe Roberts Band. This was my little secret weapon, one of these. Anytime I had to play a solo, I'd step on this. I'd have it set to a pretty moderate speed, nothing major. But what it does, especially if you've got it early in the chain before your drives, it gives you a big bump, not big, but a sizable bump in output, and just adds a little something, phasing, that allows your single note parts to just, again, rise above and jump out. So that's next up in the chain. After that, we have the MXR Blue Box. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this is a very unusual and generally considered to be esoteric pedal. It's not something that is commonly used. They don't turn up much on people's boards. What this gives you is a really nice fuzz and a second note 2 full octaves below whatever you're playing. Again, it's monophonic. You can't play more than one note at a time or it'll puke, and not in a musical way. But my thought was, I want to be able to make my single note lines jump out again. Everything's about being able to be heard over the din, because this is a very noisy type of music that I'm delving into. So this one, there's a particular thing about these pedals. in that the output basically has to be dimed all the time. It doesn't boost anything. Having it dimed essentially gives you unity gain or slightly less than unity gain. No idea why it was designed this way. But otherwise, you step on the pedal and everything actually gets quieter, which is pointless. Now, there are mods you can do to these pedals to fix that issue, but it changes the sound, and I really genuinely like the sound as is, so I'll deal with it. Ultimately, the blend, slightly above noon, and this will be for my single notes, my big dumb riffs, as it were. Same ideas with the bit crusher, big dumb riffs. And then up, a second MXR Blue Box. You're thinking, why in the world? Well, this one's going to be set like this. Both knobs all the way up. And the reason being is this blend knob actually lets you select between fully clockwise, nothing but fuzz, fully counterclockwise, nothing but octave. And I find that I really love this pedal as a fuzz. So I had to get two of them, one to use as my primary fuzz pedal and one to use for its actual intended application of being, you know, an octave fuzz. I understand Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth used to use one in this same way. He enjoyed the fuzz but didn't have much use for the octave. So that's what we've got. Next up, MXR Prime Distortion. I needed some kind of a basic distortion, and I happened to find one of these really cheaply. This particular series of pedals, they were made to be cheaper, and they feel cheaper. They're lighter weight. The enclosure is still metal, but it's not nearly as robust. These old school MXRs, you could practically kill somebody with one. They're the original blunt instrument. But anyway, I've tried this Prime Distortion, and it's a good basic distortion. It's got a good wide-ranging tone control. It's just a good distortion. Now, next up in the chain is what has become ubiquitous to a lot of doom, sludge, stoner bands, and that is the Rat. Or in this case, I believe this is actually considered the Rat 2, although it just says the Rat on the sticker. I don't know. Regardless, it's the Rat, which is a very distinctive sounding distortion. In fact, this pedal's famous for the fact that depending on where the distortion and filter knobs are set, it can give you anything from a light overdrive through to a nice heavy distortion, all the way up to kind of a fuzz. So there's our Rat pedal, and that's going to be a big part of the sound. Next up, MXR Micro Flanger, and in fact, a pair of them. Now again, overkill, right? Not really. Ideally, I'd have three. You've got to be wondering, why on earth would you need three flangers? Well, let me tell you. If you set them with both knobs all the way down, like this, you get a really great sort of metallic chorusing sound that I really enjoy, especially on cleans. And in spite of the fact that I absolutely fucking hate reverb, I also don't really love dry sounds, clean especially. So I like to have a modulation instead of a reverb, and this is perfect. This will probably be what will always be on when I'm on clean at that setting. Next up, another micro flanger with the controls more or less set at noon. This setting, or anywhere in that general vicinity, gives you a good basic flanging sound. The classic flange, MXR, you know, the Van Halen running with the devil kind of a thing. There it is. And that's a sound that I enjoy, and I want to be able to have that at my disposal. Now, why would I want a third one of these? Well, it turns out if you dime both these knobs, it gives you a absolutely killer faux Leslie rotating kind of a sound, almost bordering on univibe, and that's a sound that I enjoy also. Now, Could I just have one of these and wiggle the knobs? Sure, absolutely. But A, I'm lazy, and B, I might want to be able to layer more than one of these sounds together at once. So that's what I've got. Eventually I'll probably try to find a way to have 3 of these on the board. Next up, the classic Line 6. It's this one called the DL4. This was on virtually everybody's pedal boards all throughout the 90s and 2000s, and still on a lot of boards. There's a new smaller version that's come out that's pretty popular, but this is arguably the best delay ever made. It'll model the sound of any other delay that's ever existed for the most part. It allows you 4 presets, which again, I don't want to have to be twiddling knobs. I want to find 4 sounds that I like to use and just roll with that. Lest I forget, something back to the blue box, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that this was the effect used by Jimmy Page in the Led Zeppelin song Fool in the Rain. So if you're thinking, gee, I want to, jump onto YouTube and look this thing up, I haven't heard of this, and be sure to also look up Fool in the Rain and give a listen to the solo. It's this. And then finally, I ultimately want to have an MXR micro amp at the end of the chain to use as a boost for solos. And at the end of the chain, because it'll, hopefully, if I've got an amp with enough headroom, if you understand the concept of headroom, low wattage gives you low headroom, generally speaking. A low wattage amp, you can hit it with more gain and all you're going to get is dirtier. A high wattage amp that's not run too hot has high headroom, and if you hit it with more gain like that, you'll get more volume. That's what I ultimately want to have. So that's the general layout. I'd also hope to have a verb on there, even though I often hate verb, just because, well, here's the deal. A lot of guys have reverb on all the time. I see reverb very much as an effect, not as an always on, always part of the equation thing. Like for instance, if I was going to play Bauhaus, Bela Lugosi's Dead, gotta have reverb for something like that. So there are times when a reverb is necessary, but it's not something I'm going to use often. It's just an effect for me. So there you go. So what can I say? I can ask a few questions. What do you think about my concept for this new subgenre of music? Like I said, I can kind of hear in my head where I'm going with it. It's going to have electronic beats and a bit of sequencing. It's still going to be a nice slow tempo. The big heavy guitars down-tuned. In fact, I'm going to probably not have one standard guitar in the equation at all. I've got 3 instruments that I have set aside specifically for this project that I will show you. Maybe, you know what, we're only into 13 minutes. Maybe I'll show those at the end of the next part. The next part of this video is going to be me actually demonstrating the board. I'm going to have everything wired up, hooked up, attached, and run you through the sounds. And that's when I'll show you the instruments, because I'll have them, handy to demonstrate with. But in a nutshell, I've got a micro bass Ibanez that's going to be tuned to F sharp, B, E, and strummed. I've got what was formerly a plectrum guitar, which is like a long scale tenor. You've heard me talk about them before. That's now strung with baritone strings and is going to be tuned F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, C sharp. So essentially you have 2 octaves of power chords, 1 finger. Lots of cool possibilities there. And then finally, I'm going to have my Ibanez baritone, which I'm going to have tuned up a whole step from the usual B. The reason being, lots of bands like to ape the old Black Sabbath trick of down tuning their guitars from E standard down to C sharp standard. Gives you a nice heavy tone. But what it also gives you is rubber band strings, shit intonation, tuning issues, and it just sounds floppy. It's hard. You gotta pluck very lightly to keep from it just sounding like what it is, which is a mess. My thought was, what if I take a B baritone and tune it up a whole step? You're still going to have the exact same range, but it's going to be nice and tight. Not only the feel, which it is because it's quite tight now, but also the sound is going to be tight. And I just think it's really going to work. That'll probably be my main instrument. And of course, I've still got the room full of standard guitars if I decide to delve into any of that. But my idea is this is a totally new type of music, at least new to me. And I want it to feel fresh. The whole point is breaking free from the shackles of 6 years of being in a cover band. I'm going to be doing something entirely original and fresh. And to that end, I want to have instruments that are somewhat unfamiliar to keep things fresh. So, the next episode, as I said, the installment here, will be the actual run-through of the pedals, the pedal board, show you what it looks like finished, what it sounds like, and show you the instruments I'll be using, and you'll have a much better grasp of just exactly what it is that I have in mind. All right? So until I see you next, be good to yourself and others. Don't take any wooden nickels, unless you happen to have a thing for wooden currency. And, keep on keeping on. And till then, stay cool, stay frosty, all that good stuff I've always said. And I'll see you soon. Ciao.